Movie Holics!
Taboo. Poor sequels that people think ruin the original. Heresy. Finding merit in those said sequels. Topic. The latter Terminator movies. Welcome back to the niche. Alright, so about a month ago or more, it was reported that Paramount had taken the sequel to Terminator Genisys off their release date schedule. The movie didn't do very well, it wasn't received very well by fans or critics, didn't do well at the box office. Paint me not shocked. Most people just don't want to give the Terminator movies, after 2, the time of day. Which is understandable. I mean, the first 2 movies are not only the best in the franchise, but some of the best action blockbusters ever. Now, I'm omitting Terminator 3 from this discussion. Why? Because it was over 10 years ago. The Terminator sequel was more of an event back then. Today, Terminator sequels feel less eventful, more run-of-the-mill. Part of that is because the expectation of them being like the first 2 movies is gone. Also, so many high-profile blockbusters are released per year that it's easy for Terminator to be eclipsed. Today, Terminator is considered old hat to the new superhero kids on the block. But let's take a look at Salvation and Genisys anyway, 2 poorly received movies that seem destined to be forgotten in the pantheon of action blockbusters. Do they have any merit at all? And if they do, which is the stronger entry? As a Terminator fan and a film fan, I can admit that both fell short of what they tried to accomplish. But it's not all bad. Terminator Salvation takes place post-Judgment Day. It follows John Connor before he's become leader of the Resistance, who discovers a Terminator-human hybrid named Marcus. The 2 infiltrate Skynet headquarters to rescue prisoners and attempt to blow it all to hell. Salvation stars Christian Bale, who comes off more angry than inspiring. I don't agree Bale is awful in this movie, in fact I enjoyed him a lot, but he's admittedly not one of the more likable incarnations of John Connor. Meanwhile, Sam Worthington plays the death row inmate Marcus, who wakes up post-Judgment Day as a cyborg. Now see, I thought Marcus was an excellent addition to the Terminator mythology, a human who was altered by Skynet to be the ultimate infiltrator, and unknowingly lured John to them. It's just a shame he was played by Sam Worthington. Meanwhile, Anton Yelchin plays a young Kyle Reese who really nails the young version of the famous future soldier. He's far from experienced, but you can easily connect the dots from here to how he is in Terminator 1. So anyway, this movie is far removed from the previous flicks. There's no time travel, no major role for Schwarzenegger. Even the post-apocalyptic world looks different from what we saw in the early films. We see the future's daylight for the first time, revealing a barren, sepia world. It is this world and how it looks and feels that's probably the most praiseworthy piece in the film. I would have liked to see more of it. And story-wise, I loved the idea that Skynet realized it needed to make an altered human to ensure its existence. Like I said, Marcus was without argument the most interesting character in the movie, and I was completely sold on the twist about him. Another thing I have to give this movie points for is how it brought back how threatening the T-800 really was. After the T-1000 and the T-X, the T-800 seemed like old news. But the build-up to how dangerous they are is emphasized by John, who is deeply troubled that Skynet has sped up their production of them. The end battle against the T-800, briefly seen as a CG Schwarzenegger, is the most imposing the T-800 has been since the original film. Now, granted, it all doesn't come together so seamlessly. Bale's version of the character needed a major rewrite. There were too many underdeveloped characters. The ending was dumb. But overall, I find Salvation to be a fairly competent war film. The Terminator movies are traditionally chase movies with heavy time travel elements, so I applaud the effort to do something different. To me, it's what keeps the movie from being abysmal. It feels like a fresh take on old material, and I would have liked to see it improved on in a sequel. Although, I suppose if Salvation did get a direct sequel, it's unlikely we would have seen more of that world because McG, the director, was dead set on introducing more chase elements and time travel elements after the failure of Salvation. Even though McG didn't get a chance to make a sequel to Salvation, we still got those elements anyway in the soft reboot Terminator Genisys. Terminator Genisys takes place in an alternate timeline where Sarah Connor was raised by a T-800. When Kyle Reese goes back to defend her, he finds himself at war against his old mentor, John Connor, to stop Skynet's latest incarnation called Genisys. For those of you who didn't like how different Terminator Salvation was, this is for you. The look and feel of this movie is very reminiscent of Terminator 2, to a fault. Adding to the familiar atmosphere, Schwarzenegger returns as a T-800 with aging tissue who serves as a father figure to Sarah Connor, played by the gorgeous Emilia Clarke, who really knocks this version of Sarah out of the park. She's not a mother yet, so her juvenile behavior kind of works in a tacky sort of way. Jai Courtney plays Kyle Reese, who, unlike Clarke, is less than stellar in the iconic role. Meanwhile, Jason Clarke plays John Connor, who is admittedly more interesting than Bale's version in numerous ways, most of them ludicrous. On the less crazy side of things, Jason Clarke's John Connor is probably how most fans picture the character during the war. He's lovable, he's optimistic, he's confident, basically everything that Bale's version was not. And on the crazier side of things, even when he's revealed to be the villain, he's still very interesting because these movies have always been about protecting John Connor. Now it's all about killing with fire, or magnets. So Genisys, ignoring Terminator 3 and Salvation, reveals the final moments of the war before a T-800 is sent to kill Sarah Connor. Although this movie ignores Salvation, it's interesting that it borrows one of the film's most prominent plot points: Skynet using a human to secure its future. This time, John Connor himself. The roles feel like they're sometimes written out of character, but unlike Salvation's supporting characters, everyone gets their time in the sun. They all feel like they're being used to better effect. As a result, the development is better, and some of the characters just come off more likable. The problem is it's derivative. None of the action pieces are very original, and like I said, it just feels like a watered down Terminator 2. And then there's the time travel logic, which is just stupid convoluted. I'm sure there are plenty of quantum physics jokers out there that can explain to me how the timeline in Terminator Genisys doesn't work, but guess what? You don't have to. I don't think it works anyway. Not that the timeline in Terminator has ever made sense anyway, but you have to be confident in your screenplay that it's strong enough to convince me of all of this instead of over-explain things with technobabble just to confuse me. So I've gone over some merits, I've acknowledged some weak spots, but which of the worst is the best? You know, overall, I like the cast for both movies, even though they both lose points for casting Sam Worthington and Jai Courtney, who are borderline the same charmless actor. I do think Genisys uses its cast to better effect, giving them more interesting arcs. Save for Marcus in Salvation, he mops the floor with everyone in both movies. And although I far prefer Yelchin as Kyle Reese, I must admit that Courtney had more to do in his movie. And I have to hand it to Genisys for giving us an actual antagonist. Although he's really just another T-1000 clone, the machine-phased John Connor was fairly imposing, if flawed. I mean, John's reasoning for being able to kill Sarah and Kyle is really flimsy, a total cop-out just to excuse the chase scenes.
We're marooned, the three of us. We're exiles in time. You see, I can kill you, for there truly is no fate.
And after that, they take off, and he goes after them. Something we've seen before. I mean, you know, Terminator 1, 2, and 3 were nothing but chase movies, starring Schwarzenegger's face. Here's a fourth variation. I'm also not fond of how Genisys neutered both the T-800 and the T-1000 in the first act. Whereas Salvation worked to make the T-800 terrifying again, Genisys disposes of the machine sent to 1984 with one good shot. And to add insult to injury, beating it easily a second time within the next 10 minutes. Where were those guns in the first movie? See, I think Salvation changed it up. It didn't rely heavily on Schwarzenegger, and it pointed the franchise into a new, fresh direction. Whereas Genisys is admittedly more fun and action-packed, I think there's more attention to detail and care in Salvation. It's the little things about this movie that tickle me, like how the hulking T-600s have poorly hung pieces of rubber skin hanging from them, as explained by Kyle Reese in the first film. And then of course we get to see how John got his infamous scar by the end of Salvation, which is of course seen in Terminator 2. Yeah, Salvation fails as a dramatic piece, but I tend to favor doing something different over redundancy. Admittedly, I don't hate either film, but I think Salvation takes this one for its post-Judgment Day vision and its attempt to do something new. But that vision is now forgotten, Genisys rebooted everything, and now we have two poorly received sequels with unfinished storylines? Were they ever going to use the interference device they set up in Salvation? And who sent that T-800 to protect Sarah in Genisys? Better question, can we make a Sarah Connor Chronicles movie happen? Because I would much rather that be continued than either of these movies. Regardless, I'm still a Terminator fan, and although it's a hard life, resigning myself to mediocre entries, I keep holding out hope that one day, the franchise will be as great as it once was. So which movie do you prefer? Salvation or Genisys? Bale or Clark? McG or Taylor? As always, make sure you let me know in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe to Movie Holics. Also, make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and SoundCloud. And make sure you visit the website movieholics.net. If you want to follow me personally, my Twitter is gman on sci-fi. Once again, thanks for playing along, and I will see you next time in The Niche. Later.